so much to our presenting sponsors. You can see them here on the screen. Staffing Boutique is our guest today. Thrilled to have you here, Katie, and to learn more about you and your company, Staffing Boutique. So thanks for being a sponsor, a presenting sponsor of our show. Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Hello, Julia, and good Monday.
Hello. I just had to remember to turn off my phone.
Oh, yes. As well as myself here, Jarrett Ransom, CEO of the Raven Group, also self-professed nonprofit nerd. And again, just really thrilled to have Katie Warnick here with us, CEO, Staffing Boutique. And Katie, you have remained, you were part of us, the Corona Chronicles, but you have remained super close to the epicenter of COVID pandemic and everything. So you were on previously, again, as the Corona Chronicles guest and shared so much amazing insight and information. You definitely are able to tap into this HR expertise when it comes to hiring, hence the name Staffing Boutique. So welcome, Katie.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Now
I'm your biggest fans.
That's cool. And you're all the way from New York.
Yes, I am.
Amazing. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. And we really I think Jarrett and I have been talking about this. We know we've been talking about this with you. One of the big concerns, even from the get-go, we were really concerned that the economic toll that would be brought upon the nonprofit sector would result in a major, major upheaval of labor and talent and just bottom line unemployment. And we've seen this in our country, unemployment numbers rising. But we've also been seeing unemployment changes in the nonprofit sector well before COVID because of this amazing turnover, burnout, stress, the retirement issue that we're losing so many of our older nonprofit leaders are retiring out. And so when we met you, we were fascinated to get your voice on all these things. And so one of the things that you specialize in, one of the things that we need to kind of explore is this temporary labor thing that I think a lot of times nonprofits were just oh my gosh, we have to find the perfect marriage and we got to hold on. And we don't think about that temp kind of process. So I was wondering if you could kind of help us with that today so that we can understand it.
Yeah, for sure. So I have been doing temp staffing in nonprofits since 2005. So this has been basically my entire career. In true transparency, I never even knew that philanthropy was a job, right? And, I think that that's something that Jarrett, you had touched on the other day when you were talking about going on a date and someone, said you were oh, I work with nonprofits, and they were oh, so you must not make money. I essentially grew up not really understanding philanthropy or fundraising or anything like that. I went to Catholic school growing up, and when we would have fundraisers, my dad would give me $50 and I would come home with 50 chocolate bars, that was the extent of fundraising for me. So it wasn't until I graduated college and started to do staffing for the nonprofit sector that I was so sort of interested in the whole world of it, right? Because I didn't know what it was. So to piggyback on that, I understood that temp hiring was a great thing to do for nonprofits. Obviously, there has always been a space for executive search, I would say across all levels, always, right? Headhunters have been around for, years and years and years, but always specifically more in that director, senior level capacity. What we have found is that there was definitely a disconnect between that sort of mid-level manager, assistant level. How do we find those good people where turnover tends to be high in the nonprofit sector? And how do we entice them to work at nonprofits if they are in more of an assistant level and they don't necessarily care about the mission, and they could be going and working in corporate and making more money at an assistant level, right? So there's a bunch of different things that we're dealing with here. In terms of hiring temp staff, just in general, I always push my clients to hire temp and temp employees if there are a number of variables up in the air. Okay. So one thing to look at is commitment on time. Maybe it's a newly created position that you're looking to hire for, and you don't really know if you need someone full time. You know, do you need a 35 to 40 hour a week person to handle an events position if maybe you're only running 2 events a year? You know, is that really some place that you need something like that? So always looking at what time and hours are going to be there. And if that's the case where you don't think that it's a full-time job, entering in a temp employee is a great thing to do. Getting someone who has some flexibility with their schedule. So maybe someone who really wants flexible. Maybe they can do 20 hours a week. And then maybe if there's an event, they could do 35 to 40 or 50 hours a week, depending upon that. But it's so much more cost effective to just be paying that employee based on the work that they are doing for your organization, right? So that's one thing to look at. The other thing to look at is a lot of my nonprofits are sort of that mid-level organization. So we're in New York, real estate is tight. I have a number of clients that, you know, are in basements of development corporations or, you know, are in shared office space or something like that. They're really cramming them in. I'm talking pre-COVID, of course. But it's the sense of maybe it's a 4-person development team and you're all sitting in one area, right? And you need a database manager or you need a development assistant. And your 3 other employees are great. You guys are like a family. You love the camaraderie that has developed, and now you have to hire someone else, right? It's not essential that you do a full-time search. You're struggling with it. You know, maybe you post it, you get some bad resumes, whatever. A great thing to do would be hire a temp to perm employee, and that way you can trial the person. Because the biggest thing for a position like that, assistant, associate, database support, is going to be that they fit in with your team. It has nothing to do with their skill set. Maybe like 1%, right? You want to make sure that they know Razor's Edge. You want to make sure that they know Donor Perfect. You want to make sure that they know mail merge, whatever it is. But you also want to make sure that they know that they can't reheat their tuna from the night before in the microwave. You know, it's sort of like that's the best reason to hire a temp employee in those sorts of situations. You can trial them, and if they make some sort of, you know, office faux pas in terms of what they're doing, you could be like, peace out, and get another temp employee in there, you know, because it's so much the culture fit,
now,
especially in close quarters.
I love the tuna example. I think we can all, you know, we can all say,
I've done it.
We've been there. Katie, what is the temp timeline, right? Are we talking 60 days, 90 days? Like, what is that temp timeline that you refer to?
Yeah, so, you know, I have 2 answers to that question. So a lot of times my clients will call me and they'll say, oh, you know, I have an event coming up in, you know, I don't know, 3 months from now. We're going to need a temp. And I'm like, well, I can't find you a temp now because the market is going to change. Some other situation of employment is going to happen for that person. So if you need an events temp in 3 months, call me about 10 days prior and I'll be able to surface you, you know, 2 candidates for you to interview or screen however you want. And then they're going to start within, you know, probably 3 to 5 days of that. You know, that's how quick that movement is there. Because if you like someone, you can't say, okay, you're going to start in 3 weeks, because a good temp is actively looking for other opportunities and they're going to get snatched up. Okay. In terms of the timeline or duration that you're going to use them, I think it's really important to have that sort of thought out ahead of time. So what do your needs look like? Specifically, if we were to speak about a temp that's working on a gala, you pretty much know that timeline in advance, right? So while temps are sort of employed at will, we still want them to commit to that timeline and ensure that they will be with you through the event and then for about 4 weeks to follow up. And that range of time is talked about beforehand. The temp is committing and your organization is aware of that. In terms of, it's a newly created position, let's just say there is a need for a development assistant in a development department. It's a newly created position. The client will say, I don't know, we need them long-term. It's an open vacancy. It could potentially go permanent. In that case, we pretty much tell our temps, this could be 2 or 3 months. If you kill it on this job, it could stay long-term and they could take you permanent. And I will say most of my clients throughout my entire career, this is typically the situation. They say that they have a temp vacancy, maybe it's maternity coverage or something like that. The person goes out, we get someone in there for 3 months. The person does a great job. The person that was out on maternity returns, maybe they don't, but they like the person so much, they then make a position for that person, and that temp to perm works out. So I have placed temp jobs that have been, 2 weeks because maybe it's a vacation coverage. And then I have placed, temps that stay in roles for 6 months. And then people who have stayed on for a year. I have a development consultant right now working as a director of development. It's been a year at this point, and they've had their own open vacancy for who knows how long. But now that everything is so up in the air, they're like, why are we going to make a full-time hire right now? We're going to keep on this development consultant. And the director of development that's there, yeah, he wants full-time work, but he understands that his option is to not work at all. So he's staying on board at that time.
So let me ask you this. I want to get more of an idea for what the process is. And the reason why I'm asking this is that I'm thinking of all these people that might be in a workforce reduction environment. So, and yet maybe they don't want to leave the sector, or they understand that there's an opportunity to do temp work that filters them into a more permanent situation. What would be the process of finding somebody to communicate as you do, to marry these forces? And I have another question is, does it have to be city specific? I mean, does it have to be somebody in your own community that you reach out to in order to find these types of temp positions within our sector?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the process basically for hiring a temp would be, a client would call me with their needs. We would go over logistics. That's the most important part. So what are the responsibilities? I don't need a formal job description, but give me the 5 things that this person is going to do, and what sort of hard skills they're going to need to fulfill, right? So we look at those. Then we look at what are the hours. Do you need someone 20 to 25 hours a week, or do you think you need someone 35 to 40 hours a week? And then we look at the duration. Once we kind of have those key points in place, that's when I can go out and recruit. Yeah, for the most part, we are going to need someone that is commutable to the organization. There is so much stuff obviously up in the air right now, and so many things are, everybody's remote right now. But, for instance, I'm working with an organization over in Brooklyn, and they're hiring an executive assistant. And while they feel very comfortable with onboarding the person as a temp remotely right now, the CEO has said, as soon as Cuomo says that we can be back in the office, I need that person there. So yeah, so we need people who are commutable. Now, throughout my career, that has varied. Something like a grant writer is something that I have placed, and the person has been able to be remote. The person is in Florida or wherever, and they're working for an organization in New York. I did do major gift consulting jobs where the person sort of had an East Coast portfolio. So I've placed people that lived in Rhode Island, but essentially headquarters was in New York. It wasn't a big deal. Kind of is different for every situation. The majority of my business is in the New York, New Jersey area, but there's always sort of that off-spec situation.
Mm-hmm.
That is just fascinating, Katie. And Julie, I know we have a question, so I'll let you take a read at that. It's just so amazing, the landscape and how it's changing. And I love that you're able to, focus on your New York, New Jersey, clientele, but you're also able to find the talent elsewhere across our nation. And do if you had a crystal ball, right? I mean, that's the word of the last 90 days, that pivot. But if you had a crystal ball, do you kind of see that landscape staying? The fact that this is an opportunity for more virtual or remote work, and if you can find the talent elsewhere from your geographic scope, then it may still be a good fit even in the future.
Yeah, I would love that. I mean, that certainly opens up a lot of positions for people that I've worked with and then moved out of state, and they're constantly touching base with me. I mean, I know good nonprofit talent that are just like, Katie, do you ever get anything in Florida? Well, no, I don't. But, now at this point, if I have something open up, you could probably do it remotely. One thing that I think is sort of, I guess, like a key thing to bring up is a lot of development departments obviously have fundraising databases, and just being able to sort of trust a temp to remote in is a big deal. It's different if they're a full-time employee, but for the purpose of just confidentiality, and that's credit card information, all of those things, there definitely has to be some sort of trust going on there. And that I feel like that's the one thing that's sort of up in the air right now for temps.
Katie, that's a great point. I actually get that question a lot as a consultant. And that's something that, I have to deal with by way of conversation. I subscribe to the Association of Fundraising Professionals. So I'm able to share with them that this code of ethics and, the guidelines in which I follow as a professional fundraiser. But being privy to that sensitive data has always been an issue, COVID aside, right? And so you're right. You hit the nail on the head, is that is definitely something that will come up. And I think just to be aware of that and to know how to best navigate that, and to feel secure and confident in that confidential and sensitive information is always going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny. I feel that a lot of the really great development departments that I work with, that I know, like the vice president of development or directors of development, that, in New York City, that are such control freaks when it comes to their staff and what they're doing. And they have not been flexible at all with anyone, in the past. Like if I was to say, well, this person has to leave early because they have to pick up their kids, and they're like, no, we don't have that flexibility on culture here. And now they're all working from home and flipping out, like it's a nice adjustment or reality check for them. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it has to be something that is definitely brought up, and it's going to be the way that things have to be handled at this point.
Are you seeing, along those lines, any of your clients want to have like NDA, non-disclosure agreements signed or anything of that nature?
Nothing new. I've had to deal with those things in the past for sure, but no, nothing since COVID. Nothing has come up. I have a feeling that it will, but nothing has come up yet.
Yeah, we're getting questions about that already. We do, as you're familiar, our Friday Q&A show, and we've had a couple of people ask about that and some of the directives that are going to start to be used. And I think it's just the way that we work now moving forward because of this remote issue. It's just going to be one of those newer things. So really, really interesting. Hey, we got a question that came in. It said, what are the types of temp opportunities during the current time in the midst of COVID and the racial justice movement? So meaning, I'm taking this to mean, if you're looking at filling some of your goals or requirements for ethnicity and race in your employment profiles, are you seeing anything like that now with the temp world?
Nothing has really changed. I think that, any organization that struggled to get diversity candidates is still struggling. And I think that this is the time for them to really reflect and look at who they're hiring. I think that now is the time to sort of make strategic change that in that area, not just in temps, but just in general hiring practices. So I haven't seen anything yet, but it's something, I've been struggling with and dealing with probably since 2007. A lot of my focus here in recruitment is I do a ton of work with education reform. So I do a ton of work with charter schools, and then I do a ton of work with nonprofits that have an education base, specifically K through 12. So when we are recruiting for staff that is working in a school in Brooklyn or in Harlem, and we are trying to attract talent that reflects their demographic, it is something that we have been struggling with and trying to come up with solutions to make that work. So talking about, diversity recruitment for me is something I'm actually super duper comfortable with. It's something that comes super easy for me because it's something that we've been dealing with since 2007 when I started to work with charter schools. It's something that I think that the charter world kind of has tackled in a sense, if that makes sense. I would like to see my other clients that are not education-based kind of do the same.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, good. I appreciate you sharing that with us. So believe it or not, our time's running. We're getting close to the end. I know it goes by fast. It goes by fast for Jarrett and I too. But I want to get into some of the like nitty gritty questions on how much does this cost? Like we've talked about like what it looks like, what the process is, if you can do these things remotely, if you need to be more regional, all of that. But how does the actual money part of this work? Because what I'm thinking is I can see in this time of great flux, funders coming in, foundations coming in and saying, we'll support this extra body because, demand has gone up or things have changed. So I'm kind of wondering, how do you factor all that in?
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. So specifically what happens is you come to me with a budget of how much you can afford to pay this person, and I recruit based on budget. And that's really where, sort of the finance team or the development team has to know this going in. So you know that you have a need, you have to figure out what you're going to budget. So obviously I'm in New York, but let's just say that you needed a Raiser's Edge database manager. Okay. So I would quote you an hourly rate, and this varies, right? But let's just say it's a Raiser's Edge database manager. It's a pretty much set number based on what I know these candidates need to be paid. So that would be probably somewhere for you as an organization between about 45 and 50 bucks an hour. That number includes what now I'm paying them, my fee, unemployment costs, payroll costs, workman's comp, all the stuff that goes into the burden of that employee. So I'm covering those costs. So
So let me ask you, so that means you're actually administrating that person's salary or payment? It's
correct.
Okay.
So I'm taking on the burden. So it really is cost effective because now you're not paying obviously health benefits for them. You're not paying them vacation. You're only paying them for the work that they're doing. So it really does make sense from that perspective. So obviously every organization's budget is different, and that's why I use the Raiser's Edge database manager, because that's pretty much a skill set that every organization needs, and that number is not really going to fluctuate much in one market, right? If we were to talk about an executive assistant, an executive assistant in an international organization as opposed to an executive assistant at an organization that's, running at $1 million operating budget, those numbers are going to vary drastically, but also the candidate's experience is going to vary drastically. So that's okay. We're going into this finding, either a seasoned executive assistant with 15 years experience, and they need to be at 70 bucks an hour, 50 bucks an hour, whatever it is, versus, the person that you place at $1 million organization where that executive assistant's hourly rate can be $28 an hour. But it's also, you're going to see that drastic difference on their resumes.
Okay, cool. So now we have somebody and I think you have a sister who lives in LA, right?
I do.
Okay, so this question comes to us from California. It says, are temps exempt from the gig economy requirements in California? We have had to convert our contractors to employees. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer, but from what I'm understanding from the federal government perspective, temps are entitled to unemployment benefits regardless. And gig economy workers are not temp employees. Gig economy workers get paid on a 1099. So they are taking out for their own taxes, or supposedly taking out for their own taxes. But temp employees should be paid on a regular, W-4.
Okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I think because of the PPP, even I was asked by one of my clients if I wanted to become an employee. And I respectfully declined because of my business and the way I file my own taxes. But, basically they wanted to switch me from a contractor to an employee. And I do believe part of that has to do with, some of the PPP guidelines and rules that are changing. So I know that conversation is coming up in a lot of different forms.
Right.
Fascinating. Wow. Well, this has been amazing. I am so appreciative that, Katie, that you would come on and share your knowledge with us. I think that this is going to be one of those things that we need to keep exploring because it's changing. And, I've never heard of nonprofits talking about temp work as they are now. It's really an interesting option. And so, and I think funders are going to be attracted to this too. Funders saying, we'll pay for this talent, for this next 3 months or 30 days.
Yeah. And let me tell you, I was doing this when, during the last financial, sort of breakdown crisis, whatever you want to call it. And the first thing when nonprofits were hiring again was hiring temps because they really didn't want to pay for salaries and for benefits of people that they weren't 100% sure that they were going to need long term. So the temp market rebounded quick, back in 2011, 2012, 13, even up. And the last time I was on the show, I said, the market really didn't change to full-time hires doing so well until 2019. Yeah, that's right. So we really saw a surge in temp workers for nonprofits for a long time.
Wow. It's amazing. Well, I'm so appreciative that you can give us, your knowledge. And also I love that you bring to us the East Coast perspective, because I think as it goes in New York, or Los Angeles, then things flow into the rest of our country. And so I feel like when we're talking with you, we kind of get a heads up that maybe we wouldn't get from somebody else. So I'm really appreciative. Hey, I just want to say thank you. I'm Julia Patrick with the American Nonprofit Academy, here joined by my dear friend and amazing human being, Jarrett Ransom, the nonprofit nerd. Katie Warnick, here's her information that you can reach out to her, Staffing Boutique. Really interesting time for all of us to be observing all the different changes to the nonprofit sector. And at the heart of it, it's our talent. And so I love that you would come on the show and talk to us, Katie. It's been amazing, amazing. Thank you to our sponsors. And Katie, again, I'll thank you because you're one of our sponsors, which is super cool. And this has been the Nonprofit Show. I want to say, everybody, stay well so you can do well. We're really excited that you joined us today, and we'll see you tomorrow.